Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and someone in this town is lying. And I know that's not a big breaking story. It's Washington, D.C. It's full of politicians. Everybody's lying. But the lies that are being told right now about the investigation into the Biden family's corruption, it could very well lead to the impeachment of the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, and the President of the United States, that would be Joseph Robinette Biden. In fact, Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy confirmed over the weekend that by next week he could proceed with impeachment for Attorney General Merrick Garland at least, and it's based on what we learned from those IRS whistleblowers last week. Now, I want to break this down for you because it's actually quite simple why Merrick Garland might be facing impeachment here. Now, if you go to other cable news networks, or if you read the New York Times, or if you listen to liberal radio, if that still exists, they're going to pretend that this is a very complicated, complex, hard to understand, confusing conspiracy theory these right-wingers have come up with. And they'll make it more complicated than it needs to be. But it isn't. It's actually quite simple. I'm going to lay it out for you. In fact, I'll say it simply. It's obstruction of justice. The Attorney General has said that nothing will impede the investigation of the Biden family, despite the fact that Mr. Biden is the President of the United States. But nope, if the U.S. Attorney sees a crime, he can bring charges. He's promised that. And now we have reason to believe that that was a lie. That, in fact, the U.S. Attorney looking into the Biden family's corruption and crimes was impeded. That's obstruction of justice. And also a cover-up. And, of course, it's obstruction of justice looking into a palpable crime. We know that there is a crime committed by Hunter Biden because he's already announced that he would plead guilty to 3 crimes. So you got your crime, you got your cover-up, you got your obstruction of justice. And that's how people get impeached in this town. It really is that simple. Now, let's begin with the whistleblower. This man, Gary Shapley. He is an agent for the IRS. Look at him. He's worked for years, over 2 decades, in the Internal Revenue Service as an investigator. His job is to find the bad guys, people who are cheating on their taxes. Now, he has every reason to keep his mouth shut. He has every reason not to stick his neck out. He has every reason not to blow that whistle that he has blown. But he has. Now, this man is David Weiss. He is the U.S. Attorney for the district in Delaware. He is the man who has been responsible for investigating the Biden family and potential tax crimes, as well as many other crimes that they may have committed. Now, David Weiss is on record saying that Merrick Garland has not impeded his investigation one iota. Here's a letter he sent earlier this month to the United States Congress. I want to make clear that, as the Attorney General has stated, I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges and for making decisions necessary to preserve the integrity of the prosecution. There you go. That's under oath. All right? So, take for granted that he is telling the truth. And he's backed up by the Attorney General himself. Here he is, sworn testimony with Chuck Grassley in the United States Senate, again, just, I think, about 2 months ago. Watch.
The U.S. Attorney in Delaware has been advised that he has full authority to make those kind of referrals that you're talking about, or to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he feels it's necessary. And I will assure that if he does, he will be able to do that.
Does the Delaware U.S. Attorney lack independent charging authority over certain criminal allegations against the president's son outside of the District of Delaware?
He would have to bring, if it's in another district, he would have to bring the case in another district. But as I said, I have promised to ensure that he's able to carry out his investigation and that he be able to run it. And if he needs to bring it in another jurisdiction, he will have full authority to do that.
There you go. It's very clear, too. The questioning was specific. Can Mr. Weiss bring charges if he finds a crime was committed? Merrick Garland says absolutely. What if those crimes were committed in a district outside of Delaware, the District of Columbia, or maybe Southern California? Merrick Garland, he has our full support. He can bring those charges even if it's in another district. And David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, he backed him up in writing. Both of these men are now sworn under oath with their statements. Nothing will impede this investigation. And that brings us back to Gary Shapley. He's the IRS whistleblower, which, remember, he has every reason not to blow that whistle. He has every reason to just keep his head down, finish out his career, collect his pension, maybe move to Florida where there aren't any state taxes. He knows better than anyone. He works for the IRS. But he didn't. He didn't. He actually stepped forward last week and he gave his testimony. And this is where things get dicey for Mr. Weiss. Let's bring up Mr. Weiss again. He's the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. And in October of last year, October 7th, 2022, Mr. Weiss had a meeting with senior level managers from the IRS, including Mr. Shapley, as well as investigators with the FBI and the Justice Department. At that meeting, Mr. Shapley and his colleagues at the IRS laid out exactly the criminal behavior that they had discovered committed by Hunter Biden and perhaps other members of the Biden family. And it was at that moment when Mr. Weiss, the U.S. Attorney of Delaware, in October of last year, apparently said that he was not the deciding official. He was not the deciding person on whether charges are filed. Shapley then commented that he believes this to be a huge problem inconsistent with the public position of Merrick Garland's testimony. Special Agent in charge of the FBI D.C. Field Office, Darrell Walden, was at that October 7th meeting. He got an email summary of the meeting from Mr. Shapley and said, "Thanks, Gary, you covered it all." That's according to great reporting from Margot Cleveland over at the Federalist. So at this meeting, Mr. Weiss says, I don't have control here. I can't bring the charges. I'm being blocked in D.C. I'm being blocked in Southern California. He also goes on in this meeting to say, I asked Merrick Garland for special counsel status so that I could be a special counsel and I wasn't impeded by anybody at Justice, and I was denied that status. Now, we know that that happened at that meeting on October 7th because Mr. Shapley, the whistleblower, he wrote an email, as I just mentioned, to all the people who were at that meeting except Mr. Weiss. And as you just saw, the one response he got from that email was, "Thanks, Gary, you covered it all." Nobody responded and said, "Wait a minute, I don't remember David Weiss saying all of that." That didn't happen. And that email was written the day of the meeting, not later. So somebody is lying. It's that simple. And it's obstruction of justice. You've got the Attorney General and you've got the U.S. Attorney, Mr. Weiss, who said that we can bring charges against anyone we want, and we will. And you've got this IRS investigator who has found real crimes committed by Hunter Biden, and he says that at a meeting, that very same Mr. Weiss said that he wasn't allowed to bring charges. Merrick Garland stopped him from doing so. So who's lying? The Attorney General, who has every reason to lie to help cover up for his boss, the president, and to cover up himself? Mr. Weiss, who once again is trying to make his boss happy and to cover up his own tracks? Or this IRS agent, who could have stayed anonymous for the rest of his life? We would have never known anything. I guess it's up for you to decide, and for me to decide, and perhaps the judiciary to decide. Should Speaker of the House McCarthy allow them to move forward on an impeachment investigation? That's the latest, and it's not complicated at all, is it? There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. You're watching Salem News Channel.